Hey, folks, welcome to another edition of Dog Walk Talk, presented to you by DawgsHQ. As always, I'm your host, Jake Roos, and with me, as always, the man himself, PT Palmer Toms. What's good with you, brother?
Yeah, we're coming at you live from the On3 penthouse this week. Excited for this weekend's game. Top 10 matchup according to the AP poll. Excited about the recruits that are going to be in town. We'll break it all down today for you, and excited to do that as well.
Yeah, a lot to get to when it comes to this one. Look, highly anticipated. This is the one everybody's kind of been waiting on since Clemson, right? You wanted to get that 3-game stretch out of the way. You did so. Now it's time to open up October, where things look like a little bit more of a climb than they did in September. I guess first off, moving into Arkansas, Palmer, you always do a great Q&A with one of the insiders, one of the guys who covers the team for Arkansas. I think people have had a chance to see a little bit of them too this year as well, probably more Arkansas on TV than folks are used to. They've had some marquee matchups. So, I've even tuned into them a little bit this year when I've had the opportunity. Little bit different Arkansas team than we're used to, I think. That's pretty fair to say. Seems like a complete departure from what we saw last year as well. I mean, just in terms of what they've been able to do on the field. Palmer, I guess moving into this game, what are you looking for from the Razorbacks? What are your concerns? What should people be watching out for?
Yeah, like you said, we do that great Q&A piece each week. This week I spoke with Tom Murphy of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Excited to speak with him earlier today, and he shared a lot of great information. Like you said, this is an Arkansas team that the general public has seen a lot more than they've seen previous Arkansas teams. The big marquee primetime matchup against Texas drew some eyes, as well as this most recent game, 3:30 CBS against Texas A&M in Jerry's World. But I've caught a glimpse of both those games. Both of them were right after as Georgia was finishing up their games. So I had it on in the background, was tuned in, but as I was working, the first thing that stands out to me is like you said, this is not the same Arkansas team that we saw a year ago. And Kirby even said that. He said, this is not the same team. This is, Georgia opened up with them week 1 last year in that weird COVID experience. It was a home game for the Razorbacks. Georgia went on the road, struggled a little bit in that first half, to say the least, but came back and had a pretty, decisive win. Stetson Bennett kind of saved the day for Georgia there. In terms of Arkansas, the first thing that stands out is new quarterback. KJ Jefferson is in there for the Razorbacks. Last season, it was Felipe Franks. Felipe, Georgia fans are pretty well in tune with what he did. He's able to stretch the field some, get the ball downfield. KJ Jefferson, a little bit more of a physical dual threat quarterback. One of the things that looking at Arkansas and looking back at this past week's game against Vanderbilt, one of the biggest things that if I'm Georgia, this would concern me is the threat of Jefferson and his legs. You saw Mike Wright take off and run a couple times. Georgia did a pretty good job of containing him, but there was that one, I believe it was 3rd down, where the defense kind of went with the fake, and it opened wide up in the middle for Mike Wright to get a first down there, get some chunk yardage. Jefferson is very capable of doing that as well. He's a little bit limited coming into this game, got landed on his knee and ended up coming back into the game against Texas A&M, finished that one out. But, I would imagine that the second day he felt a little bit more sore. Third day into this week, he has probably been feeling that injury a little bit. I have no doubt that Jefferson will be out there on Saturday, but he may be a little less inclined to take off and run. And if that's going to be the case, well, he's got weapons on the outside as well. He's able to drop in the deep ball. Did that for an 85-yard score to Traylon Burks, who is probably the most talented wide receiver Georgia has faced this year, and could be the most talented wide receiver Georgia faces all year. I mean, I guess Wan'Dale Robinson would give him a run for his money here in a couple of weeks against Kentucky. But just in terms of the physicality that Burks plays with, he's a big guy, 6'3", close to 230 pounds, but he can also run. I mean, Tom was telling me earlier today that in week 2 against Texas, actually week 3 against Georgia Southern, he was clocked as one of the fastest players according to Pro Football Focus. Was at like 22.4 miles per hour in the open field as he took a screen pass 91 yards to the house. So Burks and Jefferson are the two main guys. Again, Burks is also banged up coming into this game. He exited the game against Texas A&M and did not come back from his injury. Was there for post-game media availability, has been practicing in Fayetteville this week in his normal jersey, not wearing a green non-contact jersey for the Razorbacks. So I would expect him to go, but he very easily could be limited in how he's feeling. He's probably not going to be feeling 100%, and Georgia's going to be making sure that he doesn't feel 100%. They're going to want to be physical with him anytime he's touching the ball. You want to see all 11 guys come in and putting a hat on him.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You mentioned Jefferson at 230. They got him at 245 over on the Razorbacks website. And then for comparison's sake, I went to Georgia's website. So Arkansas lists him at 6'3", 245 pounds. Georgia, meanwhile, lists JT Daniels at 6'3", 210 pounds. Somebody's fudging some numbers somewhere is all I know, because those look like very different creatures out there on the field when they're playing.
And to be fair, Jefferson is a little bit of a bigger build, whereas Daniels, you can tell there's a reason JT Daniels doesn't take off and run. He's first of all, that's not his build, but he that's not his game, but he's also not built to last doing that.
No, I agree completely. I'm just saying, I don't know that 30 pounds is the difference between those two guys. Looks a little bit more sizable to me than that. I think that it's been a really interesting transition for Arkansas. I mean, everybody has talked, kind of ad nauseum about, what Sam Pittman's been able to do with this team, the confidence that he's inspired, the way that these guys have rallied around him. I agree with all of that. I'm not surprised by any of that either. I do think sometimes what gets lost in the shuffle is how great their coordinating staff is with Kendall Briles and Barry Odom. I mean, I think that those are two of the sharpest minds when it comes to college football that there are out there. So he's built an incredible staff around him. And don't be surprised either to see Arkansas getting way more involved in the state of Georgia when it comes to recruiting. They've got Jimmy Smith on the staff up there. I believe he's the running backs coach, former coach from Cedar Grove High School, a very successful head coach down there at Cedar Grove. So, I think that this is a team that, look, I'm rooting for them. I got to tell you, I really am. I want to see a good Arkansas. I want to see Arkansas become a mainstay in the SEC. I think that's good for everybody involved. It's hard to hate them. They've been really bad over the last few years. I mean, and they had to deal with Bobby Petrino, which no one on earth should be forced to do. So I think that all of that factors in here. I think that it's an interesting matchup for Georgia. I think maybe, I don't know. Do you feel like maybe we're overhyping the nature of this matchup? Because Vegas certainly doesn't seem to think that this is very much of a matchup. 18.5, the point spread on this one. I mean, seems gigantic for a top 10 matchup to me. But look, Vegas wasn't built because they were wrong. Those guys know their numbers and stats. I mean, is it possible that the Georgia media is maybe turning this into something that it's not? And maybe Georgia really is this much better than Arkansas?
I think there's a combination of the two. I think, if like you said, it's hard to hate Arkansas. It's hard, especially, if you're a Georgia fan, a Georgia media member that supported Sam Pittman for so long and what he did at UGA. He is very much a part of the reason why Georgia is what they are today. He recruited a ton of these offensive linemen. He's 2 years removed, but a guy like Jamari Salyer, that doesn't happen without Sam Pittman. No, and Georgia this season doesn't happen without Jamari Salyer. And so, I agree with you. I think it's hard to hate what they're doing. and because of that, because of the story that they are in college football this year, maybe fans, media members are kind of looking at this as a little bit tighter of a game than Vegas would be looking at it. But like you said, this coordinating staff that Pittman has with him is very, very good, and that's hard to overlook. Like Barry Odom, a guy that was the head coach at Missouri for 4 or 5 seasons, and Kirby Smart. I don't know that I've ever heard Kirby Smart be as complimentary of a opposing coordinator as he has been this week of Barry Odom. I mean, he said, he on Monday he mentioned that Barry makes you play left-handed, and Barry and his staff do that better than anybody else in the country. And he was kind of pressed on that Tuesday, and he said, yeah, I mean, I think that they make you do that more than what Georgia does. And just because of how different they are in what they do, the number of guys that they're dropping back in coverage, the different fronts that they're going to show you. And going back to my conversation with Tom this morning, he was saying that if you go listen to Steve Sarkisian and Bijan Robinson after that Texas game, they were shocked by the amount of different fronts that Arkansas gave them. They had prepared for 4-man front all preseason. That's what they showed in their opener against Rice, I believe. And then they come out against Texas week 2, and it's all 3-man, and Texas doesn't really know how to handle that. So, I think because of the amount of different things that they can show you. Another big reason is the experience that this Arkansas team has. I think it's a huge reason why they've made that jump from, it's a big reason why they made the jump from in year 1 of Sam Pittman, but also the reason that they're making a year 1 to year 2 jump with the amount of experienced players that they have. They've got, I think it's like 10 COVID super seniors, 20 something actual seniors. This is a team that hasn't lost a ton of guys over the last couple of years, to the NFL. I think that could change with the amount of, production that they're having this year and the amount of spotlight that they're getting this year. But in the past, that wasn't the case. They weren't getting that spotlight. They weren't being out there and showcased as, hey, look at these prospects that we've got here in Fayetteville. And Sam Pittman took advantage of that and said, hey, come back. Look, we will, we're building something. You can be a part of it. And in doing so, you're going to only help your draft stock. So, they've got guys back like Grant Morgan, Hayden Henry, Bumper Poole, 3 very physical, veteran, savvy linebackers. In the secondary, you've got, Jalen Catalon, I believe is his last name. Jalen Catalon, 2 interceptions in the first game. He made some plays last year against Georgia. SEC Defensive Lineman of the Week, Trey Williams, is a transfer from Missouri. So he had the connections to Barry Odom. He comes into Arkansas and is making an impact immediately. Had a couple sacks and 3 quarterback hurries, several tackles for loss against Texas A&M. Drew some holding calls on those, Texas A&M offensive tackles, put some pressure on them. And so I think going back to what we were talking about and Vegas seeing this as a, not necessarily a blowout, but not a nail biter.
18 points feels like a blowout to me. For a top 10 opponent, that feels like you blew out.
Outmatched for sure. Yeah. Versus the Georgia media kind of looking at this as, hey, this is Georgia's biggest test of the year. Well, Georgia played, a top 3 Clemson team in week 1. And now we're seeing what Clemson is, with the loss to NC State. I don't know that this is a bigger test than what Clemson was. I think Georgia maybe broke Clemson down a little bit, but I do think that this is a very good Arkansas football team. And I think that there's probably somewhere in the middle in terms of, the difference between these 2 teams. I don't know that it's a nail biting game. I don't know that it's a blowout 3-score win.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, I don't know, man. I just have a hard time going there with a top 10 team. That seems like a big stretch to me. Yeah, while you were talking, I was going through the roster like I always do, just seeing if there are guys that I recognize. Because, like I say every week, Georgia's recruiting the players that Alabama's recruiting, that Clemson's recruiting, et cetera. So how do they stack up talent wise? And there are actually quite a few names, that I recognize on here. Devin Bush, Miles Slusher is another guy who I remember his name. Matteo Soli out of Douglas County High School. He was a guy who was pretty well regarded at his time. Andy Boykin out of LaGrange High School was a really interesting recruitment. He was kind of all over the place. Looked like maybe he was going to Auburn. Georgia was in the mix for a little while. Ends up at Arkansas. I think what's interesting is when you get over into that receiver room, though, and you're talking about Treylon Burks, who at this point I think going to be the toughest test this Georgia secondary has had on the season. I mean, the kid is sitting, I think he's top 25 in the nation in receiving yards, 373 receiving yards already on the season for Treylon Burks. Out there making some insane grabs too. I mean, just not making the easy catches, making the tough ones as well.
And I mean, last week he had like 6 for 100, 60, 190 something.
Yeah. I mean, he's been blowing the doors off of people. I mean, he's finding space and he's making plays. I think this is a great test for Georgia. I really do, because look, is Justin Ross the same player that Justin Ross was 2 years ago? I don't know. I mean, it didn't look like that in game one, and it doesn't look like that right now in the season. But at the same time, that's a first game. This kid's got momentum under his belt. He's got 5. This will be his 5th game of the year. Treylon Burks is going to come into Athens with a head of steam. I mean, I think that where it's going to get interesting is, will KJ Jefferson first off, will that offensive line be able to control what Georgia wants to do in that front 7? And then simultaneously, is KJ Jefferson going to be able to get that ball off fast enough? Or is he going to end up taking it and tucking it down and running with it a lot? I don't have those answers. I don't know. We will find out on Saturday. I promise you that. But, I guess looking at this Burks matchup, who takes that? Who do you think draws that card? To me, this goes back to what I said early in the season about Justin Ross. And, I think that this is a ready built for Kelee Ringo matchup. I mean, he's tall, he's fast, that to me, that you want a big, tall, fast guy on it. Okay, well, you got one in your secondary, and a guy who's caught some momentum here with him being with the season progressing. Kelee Ringo taking some steps forward. How do you like that matchup? And I mean, do you think Keely's the guy there?
Yeah, and that's one of the questions that I addressed earlier this week, and was wondering, is Georgia gonna go with one person to guard Treylon Burks, or are they gonna stick to kind of what they've done so far this season and stuck to their side of the field? That's going to be interesting to watch. I like you said, we don't know the answer. We'll find that out Saturday. If it is one person, I do think that Kelee Ringo is the perfect build for this kind of matchup. A big, long corner against a big receiver. But at the same time, you've got to wonder, does Georgia, if I were to ask you right now, who's Georgia's top corner, I think we would have the same answer.
I would say Darian Kendrick.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you're matching up the number one corner versus the number one receiver, it's Kendrick, and he may not necessarily be the build that you want against a guy like this. He's lost some of those battles to some bigger physical receivers over the years, but at least he's been tested like that. He's been tested in big time matchups against very talented receivers. He went against Justin Ross in practice. He went up against LSU in the national championship. He's gone up against Ohio State twice, and that's why Georgia brought him in. Was the amount of experience and big game experience that he has at his cornerback position. Well, Georgia's in a big game. I feel like you probably want to match up, your big game corner with their big play receiver. But like you said, I do think Ringo matches up very well in terms of, and Amir's speed in terms of, just the size wise. Speed did show a little bit of struggles against South Carolina and was replaced in that starting lineup by Ringo. He struggled against Josh Van, but Josh Van was a little bit smaller, quicker of a receiver versus Burks being the bigger guy. So maybe this is a game where you put Ringo and Speed on him and you let those guys rotate and you keep fresh legs in there going up against a tough task in Burks, or you stick to one side of the field and whether it's Kendrick or Speed or Ringo, it's going to be one of those three guys and you feel confident in all of them. So that's going to be that is one thing that I'm certainly going to be watching in those first couple of drives. What does Georgia do with Treylon Burks? How do they guard him? That's certainly a matchup that we'll be watching.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, what you have to rely on as well, if you're those guys, is you have to be funneling him into those safeties as well. I was checking the stats before this. Lewis Cine, one of the top pass defenders in the nation this year with four passes defended already. So you got some veterans back there. Chris Smith, with another pick last week. I mean, he's kind of looks like he's playing well to this point in the season. So let those guys do their jobs also. Let them help you out there. I think that can be advantageous. I don't see a situation where Georgia's spelling one guy on them. They just have never done that. And I just don't see them starting this week. All right, let's move into some over-unders here. It's Palmer's favorite part of the show, everyone, because he never knows what I'm going to ask him.
I never really know what you're going to ask in the first place. So.
No, that's fair. That's how we keep it interesting around here. All right. So last week, a bit of a fall off defensively for Georgia in the sack category. Obviously not as a whole performance. It was a tremendous performance, but from the sack category, only one on the week last week. I'm setting the over under at 4 this week, going above that 3 that we've normally been working with. Do you think Georgia goes over or under 4 on Saturday sacks?
I'll take the under. I know that goes against what I was saying earlier, and saying that Georgia can get 3 sacks on anybody. I think that they can, but I also think that this is, Sam Pittman's going to have his offensive line ready to play in this matchup. With him being an offensive line guy, that you start your team there and you build from there if you're Sam Pittman. And that he's really going to be emphasizing that this week. He really wants that offensive line to have a good showing against Georgia. They're going to be motivated knowing the front 7 that Georgia has, the pass rush success that Georgia has had. Again, going back to the super senior idea, they're an experienced group. I think I'll take the under there on sacks for Georgia with the line set at 4.
All right, I'm gonna take the over on that one. I just think that they kind of get back to doing that. If they have to affect this quarterback, this is not a guy that you can allow time. Look, God bless Vanderbilt, but you could allow those guys time, and it wasn't going to really matter. They were going to have trouble hitting their spots. So this is not a situation where you can do that. They're going to have to get in there, bring that havoc, bring the chaos. I think that you'll see a lot of blitz packages. I think that sets up well for a number of sacks. I think that they hit 4 in this matchup. All right, obviously, 2, we got to talk about the spread. We already touched on that a little bit. 18.5, you think Georgia covers this one, Palmer?
I don't. And we think I kind of gave that one away talking about that game, talking about it earlier. This is it's a game that I don't feel like Georgia is going to be, I don't think it's going to be a nail biter. I don't think it's coming down to the last drive of the game, but I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to take, Georgia putting it away late in the game.
Close like 3 or close like 14?
Close like 10.
Okay. All right.
So I think it's going to take Georgia, Georgia's going to be up 1 score late in this game, and it's going to take that offense, either driving down the field, chewing some clock and running it out, kind of like they did against Clemson, or, it's going to take them getting in the end zone, and putting it away, making it a 2-score ball game where you can give the ball back to Arkansas and they've got to, they've got to, pray for a miracle there. So I will take the under there, but I don't think that this is going to be, a nail biter type deal.
Yeah, I'm going to go with you on that one. I think the under makes sense to me as well here, and for a reason that you mentioned. And I think that you're going to see Georgia grind a lot of clock in this one. I think that it just makes sense to play ball control against these guys. Look, you know that this is a dangerous offense. They can score. They've got running backs. They've got wide receivers. This quarterback has got some great momentum behind him right now. So while your defense is going to be more than capable of dealing with that, I feel sure of that to say the best bet is to just not allow them to do that. Don't give them extra opportunities. I think that this is where you don't see Georgia, picking up those giant chunk yardage plays on the ground, but you do see them just kind of methodically 3 and 4 and just wearing you down on that defensive front. I think that that makes a lot of sense to me as well. I'll take the under there. All right, last one here on our over-under segment. This is a good one I came up with, I think. References to Sam Pittman coaching at Georgia on ESPN. I
don't even know what you're setting it at, but I'll take the over.
Yeah, I bet you will. I was going to set it at 20. I think that was being pretty conservative, to be honest with you, too, considering, especially if you go back and see how much time they spent on Cooper Manning and Arch when they showed up for the South Carolina game. That feels very conservative to me. So you're taking the over there, huh?
Like I said, doesn't matter what you set it at. I'll take the over there. I think that's an easy storyline. Although I will give Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler some credit. They don't necessarily take the easy bait, clickbait type things that maybe an SEC network call would take. And also I think it's a lot easier to take that kind of stuff when you're talking about a 35-0 first quarter.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit are going to be eating donuts by the end of the first quarter.
I'd be surprised if they're eating donuts in general.
I agree completely. What I'll be interested to see, here's another good one while I'm thinking of it. Over under number of times we see a picture of Kirby Smart's first staff at Georgia. I'm going to set that one at 3. I think you'll get that one quite frequently because they're going to talk about Mel Tucker, Shane Beamer, Sam Pittman as well. He's got a little bit of a coaching tree that's come out from under him at Georgia, and I think that I got a feeling we're going to see that staff photo make a round.
I'll take the under on that one. I don't think you're going to see that photo more than once or twice, okay. But I do think that you are going to hear about that coaching tree of sorts. Now here's something I'll throw at you and something that we ought to cover. Okay. I don't necessarily know how we're going to do it as an over under here, but what kind of impact do you think that Darnell Washington and Tyke Smith are going to have in this game? I would set an over under on snaps between the two. But I don't know, that there's an accurate snap count out there, but just in terms of the impact, that I feel like that's something we ought to discuss.
Yeah, I don't know that it's going to be huge personally. I think that you work both of them back in slowly. They've only had this week to practice. It's not like they've been going full contact for all this time. They've had to get this injury healthy. And to me, this is an injury you have to be careful with because a bone break in the foot, seems like one of those things that you can re-aggravate pretty easily. So I don't see a lot of necessity to run those guys out there. I think they will get some snaps. What's going to be really interesting to me is not so much Darnell. I think that he kind of has his role sort of staked out by virtue of being the size of a mammoth. So when I'm looking at Tyke Smith is how does he fit into this secondary now? Because it seems pretty well established to me. I feel like they're comfortable with the pieces they've got. In his absence at that star position, Latavius Brenning has done a great job. 3 pass deflections, 3rd on the team in tackles. He's done what you wanted out of that. And behind him, Javon Bullard and Kamari Lassiter have also filled in admirably. So where does Tyke Smith kind of fall in this rotation now? That's my big question about the two of them returning. Like I said, with Darnell, I think it's a little clear. Smith, that one's got me scratching my head a little bit. Palmer?
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think both of them will play. I think that they will see some time, but I don't know where they fit in because, like you said, especially with Smith, Darnell knows this offense. He's played in it. He's established a role in it. Even going back to the spring, they were getting reps with him and Brock Bowers and John Fitzpatrick. They've worked with that group before. They haven't necessarily, outside of, some walkthroughs during the summer and the preseason practices prior to the injury, they haven't gotten a ton of work with Tyke Smith in there. Furthermore, this is going to be his first, time where the bullets are flying in a Kirby Smart defense. And so, that's something else that you got to take into consideration, that, he's not as accustomed to playing in this as Darnell Washington is on the other side. So here's the over under I'll go with. And since we both agree that Washington will have some sort of role, that Brock Bowers has kind of established himself as this passing threat, and that but we do think that Washington is going to be in there. Over under 1.5 targets for Darnell Washington.
I'm going to take the over on that. I think that seems like a safe bet to me. Mostly because I think now you got to clue in on one of these two weapons. Okay, well, Darnell's still kind of working his way back, so you got to try to shut Bowers down, which nobody's been able to do at this point. I think that kind of springs Darnell a few times. I do think we'll see some two tight end sets, and I think that sets up really favorably for him. So I'll take the over on 1.5 targets.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. That that there's going to be a lot of attention put on Brock Bowers, especially after the game he just had, with 3 touchdowns there. I think that, it's hard to guard a guy that's as big as Darnell Washington. And it's especially as hard to guard him when you're putting the attention on Brock Bowers that I would expect Arkansas is going to put on him. So I will take the over there. I think 2 targets is probably 2 targets are probably going to come his way.
Now, outside of the game, there's the game within the game, and that game itself is recruiting. And a big weekend for it. No doubt about it. Since I'm the recruiting guy, I'll throw hosting duties over to you, Palmer, and let you pepper me with some questions now. Maybe hit me with some stuff that I'm not expecting.
Yeah, we've been doing this pretty frequently now. Georgia's been on a little bit of a run of commitments here. They get another one today on Wednesday, the 29th, Kayin Lee. Tell us a little bit about him, 2023 cornerback out of Cedar Grove.
I wrote this in my breakdown, and I really encourage people to go read that because it's going to sound like a slight when I first say it, but in no way do I mean it. I said Kayin Lee is not Keely Ringo. Don't come into that expecting this, okay? This is a 5'11", 170-pound kid, right? I mean, this is not 6'3", 4.33 speed, okay? He's quick, don't get me wrong, but
he ran like a 4.3 at this summer at Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, he's a speed merchant, don't get me wrong, but he's not this big, long, the new generation, I guess, of what people are looking for, that big trend we've seen with wide receivers. They're all 6'5" now and all this. To me, Kayin Lee, a very typical size for a defensive back. What he is, very technically sound. A kid who is hanging in the hip pocket. He's got great ups, so he can get in there and affect that 50-50 ball. Very capable coming down with the pick, does that consistently as well. Good change of direction. And a really solid tackler. And that's something I love to see on cornerback film when I get the chance. I'll give him a lot of credit for this too. A lot of corners that I've covered over the years, they put on their film, oh, here's me returning kicks. Oh, here's me catching touchdowns. All right, look, you're a cornerback. That stuff's nice, and it shows that you're a great athlete. Don't get me wrong. But I want to see cornerback play. That's what his film is. It's him playing defensive back. He's comfortable being on an island. He's at one of the best programs in the state of Georgia at Cedar Grove. They've already got the 2022 commit in Carlton Madden. They're going after another 2022 commit in Kristen Miller. So you got to think that all of that helps. To me, I love the pickup. Look, I think that you are starting this class off with a duo of really, really talented cornerbacks. And given the emphasis on the passing game that we're seeing now, you just can't have enough defensive backs. So even though Georgia looks like they're going to take a huge class at defensive back, probably 5 at least in this class, I would say, in 2022. No signs of slowing down where 2023 is concerned. And look, everybody's getting a chance to get on the field. Why not? Those guys aren't intimidated about their opportunities. I think it's big. I think that this was a great pickup. kudos to Jamal Adai for this one, and Dogs on a hot streak when it comes to that 2023 class.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned it there with the with the pursuit of Cedar Grove. There's been some movement on Twitter to discuss the sweep of Cedar Grove and picking up Kristen Miller there. So that'll be an interesting one to watch. As we talked about with that 2023 class, when after Bo Hewley committed this past weekend, talented group already, and there's going to be some talented guys in town to potentially try and add to that group. Let's look at the 2022 class of guys that are going to be in town. Also an incredibly talented group. Several Georgia commits have already said that they're going to be there. Jalen Walker just put on Twitter he'll be in Athens on Saturday. We've spoken with several others that are expected to be there. And in terms of guys that aren't necessarily committed to Georgia, there's some other guys that are going to be in town. I guess let's start with the official visits and someone that is committed, Julian Humphrey, Florida commit.
Yeah. Very interesting here. I mean, this is a guy that I feel like Georgia does have a chance with. Julian Humphrey has shown a lot of affection for Georgia, seems really interested in what they're doing. I haven't heard necessarily that he's wavering on Florida, but it seems more about what Georgia's doing rather than what Florida's not doing. And I think that kind of seems to be what's catching a lot of people's eye. We're going to talk about another one of those guys here in just a second, but Julian, an interesting case. I think what's going to be interesting for Georgia in this class is to figure out who you take at these spots. Who do you spend these defensive back spots on? Because, I mean, you got quite a few guys already on board. You got quite a few guys interested. I mean, how do you kind of work the numbers and how do you kind of get it where it is? I think for that reason, I don't know that Humphrey ends up being a part of this class. I think that he probably ends up second with Florida. I think Georgia's got just a little too much in the pipe when it comes to defensive backs. But, hey, I'm not writing him off. Like I said, I've spoken with people who say Georgia's chances here are very legitimate. Something to watch out for. Another
Georgia corner on an official visit to Georgia this weekend. Former UGA commit Dion Bowie committed to Texas A&M currently. He'll be there. What are your thoughts on him, and what are your thoughts on the Dogs' chances to land him in the end?
Smoke, they call the boy. Listen, I'll tell you this. I do not have a good feel on this one. I don't know. I don't think anyone does. I mean, I used the phrase the other day on the board. I said, this one can change with a stiff breeze. I mean, it seems like his big attraction to Texas A&M is Nick Williams, former UGA staffer, now a staffer there. That's a big draw for him. But at the same time, look, staffers move on all the time. I mean, this is not a guy who's an on-field coach or a coordinator or something like that. And even if he were, he's still susceptible to move. These player personnel guys or these, behind the scenes guys, they're moving constantly in these ranks. And so, Texas A&M better hold on to him if they want to keep Smoke aboard. That being said, the people I've spoken to say this is a week-to-week, almost day-to-day thing with this kid. You just have to keep watching it because it changes frequently. And, yeah, former Georgia commit. I think people were a little surprised that he went with A&M, maybe. But then there was the Nick Williams connection, and then it all kind of, I think, brought it full circle. But in the end, it's an interesting one for me. I'd be lying to tell you I knew what Smoke Bowie's going to do. And I think Smoke Bowie would be lying to tell you that he knows what he's going to do. I think this one will go all the way down to signing day. So, Georgia in it and will be in it throughout, but hard to predict them as the leader or the winning out at this point.
Yeah, and that's one that Kirby Smart wants to grab, a defensive back from his hometown of Bainbridge, Georgia. That's one that he's certainly going after. Third official visitor this weekend and last official visitor that we'll talk about before we get into a couple guys that are coming in town for unofficial visits. Another defensive back, this time Kamari Wilson, a safety out of IMG.
Yeah, Kamari Wilson. I almost called him Lassiter. We're getting a few two Kamaris in here, but I think that, big visit to watch for Georgia here. Have been the perceived leader for some time. Florida in the mix for this guy. He he is from the state of Florida. He's not one of these kids that IMG pulled from, Idaho or something. He's actually a Sunshine State kid. And so, it's not like it's a giant step for him in terms of distance, et cetera. Florida obviously wants a part of him, but like I said, Georgia, the perceived leader for some time, I think that they can kind of shut the door, widen the gap, whatever you want to say this weekend. I'm not saying that he commits on the spot or does something like that. I think that he's a kid who will be a little bit more thoughtful in his process necessarily, want to use the moment to build the brand, et cetera. But I do think Georgia with a strong chance here to impress once again and make an impact on Kamari Wilson. Like I said, perhaps widen that gap. Right now, Dogs are my pick.
Yeah, and then moving on to those unofficial visits, we got two guys that are committed to other schools that will be in town. Let's start with Aluba, Florida State commit. Also out of IMG.
Yeah. Big weekend for IMG when it comes to Georgia this weekend. This is a name that I don't know that people have been paying attention to as much, but after losing Elijah Pritchett yesterday to Alabama, and listen, I that's not any knock, I don't think, on Georgia's class this year, because Elijah Pritchett, frankly, just didn't ever seem interested in Georgia. They were always second, third on the list. It was never a situation where you felt like the Dogs were really surging for him. But suddenly the struggles of Florida State bring a guy like this into the eye. And, had a great piece with Chad Simmons. Get over to DawgsHQ and check that out. But says basically, Georgia stayed in contact with me. I'm comfortable with that team. I think that you're really going to see Georgia pour in heavily to Aluba over the course of the next couple of weeks and months, because I do think that they feel that Florida State is in a really tough position and is probably going to suffer a little bit down the road when the recruiting class. This is a kid that makes a lot of sense for him. I've seen him in person, big physical cat, a guy who, he looks, when you draw up offensive linemen, this is what they look like. He can be a really good player. I think that makes all the sense in the world. So, yeah, keep pushing for him, I say. And great to get him in town this week, especially, like I said, on the heels of losing another target at his position.
And then flipping over to the other side of the ball, another committed player, number 5 player in the newly updated on 300 for the class of 2022. Michael Williams committed to USC. He'll be in town. Another defensive lineman will be joining him. That's Shamar Stewart out of the Miami area, as well as and then a top 10 guy that'll be in town in that on 300. Stewart coming in at number 11 in the on 300. Another top 10 guy going to be in town. This one committed to Georgia, Malachi Starks. How much do you think Malachi is going to be pushing those two, very highly touted guys to try and get them to come aboard on that Georgia defense?
No, I think that he's going to be crucial. I think that's why you see guys like Jalen Walker coming to town. They recognize that this is going to be a huge weekend for Georgia recruiting. Don't be surprised if this is one of those weekends where they try to sneak a couple of guys in, where there's some names that you're not hearing under the radar, and then suddenly, it pops up on Saturday that this guy's here. I think that that's the case because it seems like they're trying to build the visitor list that strongly, which is interesting because this is a noon kickoff. So you do have the, advantage of a little bit extra time after the game and whatever to somebody making a burrito here in the background of the DawgsHQ today. But this is, I think that like I said, you will see a lot of those guys pushing very heavily and being impactful. So look for those guys there. Shamar Stewart, I thought Georgia was out of this one for a long time. They've really picked up steam based on their production this year. He's taken note of that. This was a kid that at one time I felt would end up at Georgia, and then it totally kind of flipped. Now it seems like it's trending back toward that way. That would be huge. Shamar Stewart, good looking prospect. Michael Williams, yeah, he's committed to USC. It's going to be tough times. He keeps saying the staff's still in place. Well, yeah, the staff is still in place until they're not, because whenever the new hire's made, that guy is going to bring in his own people as well. Georgia, I think a really strong chance there as well. So I feel really good about that. Shamar, a little bit more all over the place. Hard for me to predict that one right now. Like I said, just kind of it's been really up and down. So it'll be interesting to see if Georgia can continue the dominance this week and really continue to impress Stewart, really build their profile with him.
Yeah, like you said, noon kickoff Saturday at Sanford Stadium. Certainly going to be an interesting one on the field as well as off the field for that recruiting purposes. College Game Day going to be in town. Excited to have that crew rolling in, and we're excited to bring you coverage Saturday. I'll be in the stadium. Jake, what are you up to this?
We're not telling what Jake's up to this weekend. Don't worry about what Jake's up to this weekend. Just make sure you tune into that next podcast, okay? We'll have some fun stuff for you, I promise.
Good stuff. Well, Jake, any last words?
Hey, I think that's it for me. So for Palmer Toms and myself, Jake Roos, get over to DawgsHQ. Check us out. Thank you for tuning in today. This has been Dog Walk Talk.